Hey guy, hey guys. So this morning I am celebrating my 40th wedding anniversary, and I was gonna make a video telling you everything I did right and how I got to 40 years of marriage. And I realized that video would only be about 30 seconds. And then I thought, well, let me tell you everything I did wrong. And I thought that video would be way too long. So I'm just gonna give you a couple quick pieces of advice I heard from really smart people. Actually, all the guys I want to mention are doctors of one sort or another. The first one was Dr. James Dobson, the late Dr. James Dobson. I heard him say once, don't marry the person you could live with. Marry the person you can't live without. When I met my wife, I just fell in love and nothing else mattered. And when we got married, we were two inner city kids who came from working class, poor families. Neither one of our parents ever owned a house, ever owned a new car, and they both worked both of our parents worked very hard. So we didn't know about investing or nothing. We had nothing. We started negative. We started borrowing money. But I knew I couldn't live without her. And it's really important because no matter what anyone tells you, marriage is the hardest thing that you'll ever do. It takes work and it takes commitment. And people are amazed because I usually start things and never finish. I have a friend who's a YouTuber that always wants me to collaborate, and wants me to do it like on a regular basis. I'm like, bro, you would hate me. I'll train with one guy for a while, fighting, some fighting art. And next thing I know, he's calling me up. He's like, yo, Rob, where you been? I just have a hard time sticking with things. But by the grace of God, I stuck 40 years with my wife. And looking back, I seen it was the grace of God. You see, like I said, we were young, dumb, and broke when we got married. And, St. Paul even tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 1 and 2, it's better not to be with a woman. It's better to stay celibate like me. St. Paul stayed celibate and just focused on Christ. It's better as a Christian to do that. But because of temptation, God says, get married, And there was no one else I was ever tempted with to spend the rest of my life. And by the grace of God, like I said, we were broke. We didn't know what we were getting into. And but I knew that she was most important. And I became a Christian. I sort of had a radical encounter with Jesus in boot camp. And although I didn't know the Bible well, I didn't know church history well, I knew Jesus, and he made it clear to me that he's number one. My wife is number two, my children are number three, and I'm number four. So early on, we were broke. We didn't have a car. Actually, I didn't have my license. I got my license taken away for getting caught with a stolen car when I was 15. Long story. But because of that thing I did, I couldn't get my license till I was 19. So I don't even think I actually had my license when I went in the Navy. And so we had a baby right away. And so my wife was home with the baby. We felt led that she would stay home with the children and I would bring home the bread. That's the way we seen it, reading the Gospels and reading the New Testament. And there was a Navy boxing team on base, and they would let people that weren't on the team box. And I really enjoyed it, and I was pretty good at it. And I was so confident, maybe a little too cocky, but I was so confident I could make the team. I just had to get my cardio up because running 5 miles at a 6-mile pace was awesome, but it's nothing compared to boxing cardio. Just saying. And But at the time, I had no car, so, there was free shuttles on the base. So I'd take it to the gym after work. So I had shore duty and I was on base. Then I go to the boxing gym, and then by the time I got home, it was kind of late. And my wife never complained. She was such a good, godly wife. But I knew she was home all day with the baby. And I was like, man, this is kind of selfish. And I kept justifying it. Well, if I make the boxing team and I make the Olympics, man, I'll make a future for our life. And I just felt, God showing me that I'm to love my wife like Christ loved the church. And Christ gave up heaven for us. So I gave up boxing, and, just one small thing, but people are like, oh, you don't stick to anything. Well, I stuck to marriage. I rolled, when I got out of the Navy, I rolled with the Gracies, Hoyler, Hickson, there was 7 Gracies. No one even heard of them. It was 2 weeks before UFC. And Hickson trained black belt. Hickson Gracie trained black belt, the only one in America other than Horry and Gracie, who was in California at the time, was at this school I was at. Back then, there was no such thing as MMA. It was like Bruce Lee, Jeet Kune Do, or freestyle karate, but we knew you had to grapple and stand up and fight. And my cousin was like, dude, if you stuck with that, you'd be one of the highest ranking jiu-jitsu guys, because that was in 1990. No one even heard of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But again, I didn't stick with it, because by then I think we had our second child, if I'm not mistaken. And again, God, wife, children, me. When I was in the Navy, the only reason I got in was the grace of God. I got in trouble with the law, and I told the judge I was going to go into the military, and he said, you better. It wasn't like an ultimatum. It was kind of I worked it out with him. And he, it was kind of he trusted me and let me go. Didn't charge me with what I was guilty of. But I went in. I was able to get in the Navy with no high school diploma. I quit school. I was a juvenile delinquent. And, Ronald Reagan wanted a 500 ship Navy. So they were making exemptions for guys that scored really high on the ASVAB, but didn't have a high school diploma. And the first thing my commander did was made me get my GED. And then he told me that he used to be an enlisted man, and he became an officer. And I think he made chief. He went from E1 to E7, highly decorated, from Vietnam, Brown Water Navy. And he went from 01 to, I guess it's 05, commander. And then right before I left, he made it to captain, which would be the equivalent of a colonel in the Army. He said, there's a program, Rob, you qualify. It's called Boost. And for enlisted guys who never went to college because their families were economically disadvantaged and couldn't afford it, but yet they scored high enough on the ASVAB to qualify to enter. Their score was high enough, equivalent to whatever you take, the SAT or whatever it was back then, to get into the Naval Academy. As long as they, had the military bearing. So there was 3 main requirements: economically disadvantaged, so you couldn't go to college; smart enough to go to college; and you proved that you had the military bearing. You were disciplined, you were a good sailor, you could handle the academy. And he said, yeah. He goes, I'm going to sign off on this. I'm sure I'll get the captain to agree. And this is going to change your life, Rob. This is going to change your life financially, your career. This is going to change your life. You're going to have an appointment to the Naval Academy. By this time next year, you will be in the Naval Academy. I was so excited. I told my wife, we were so excited because we're still broke at this time, no car. We lived in this crappy little apartment right outside of base because I had to walk out of the base. We used to walk to this little Disciples of Christ church around the corner. And so we were really excited. And then, I had this packet of paper, I had to fill everything out. And then my commander calls me in the office. He's like, Rob, you're married? Why'd you get so married so young? And so I said, I'm in love. He's like, well, that's one requirement that you didn't meet. You can't be married to enter the academy. You have to be single, but don't worry about it. I have a friend in legal. We get you a quick divorce. Your wife can move up there. You can see her on the weekends or whenever you have leave. And just live like boyfriend and girlfriend until you graduate from the academy. And I'm like, Commander, I can't do that. He's like, well, why wouldn't you do that? This is like a 1 in a million chance. I'm like, because God hates divorce. And he kind of looked at me funny. He said, well, think about that, Rob, because this is like a one-time thing. And again, there's nothing virtuous about me. It was the grace of God. God showed me. And it's his grace that shows us. Because according to the Council of Trent, we're not saved by faith or works. If you say you're saved by faith or works, you're anathema. According to the Council of Trent, without the grace of God, we wouldn't even think about doing the right thing. So this is the grace of God, I experienced because I had an encounter with Jesus. Not that I was catechized or discipled by anybody. I had an encounter with Jesus, and I spent every day with Jesus, every day reading his words in the gospel. Then another great piece of advice I got from a scholar. I love scholars. Blue Collar and the Scholar. I had Dr. Scott Hahn talking about a book he wrote, but we kind of got off subject. Like I do, I always bring people off subject. He'll probably never want to interview me again because I was just really long-winded, as you can imagine. Or he'll never want me to interview him again, but that's all right. I enjoyed every moment talking to him. I picked his brain like I do. And he said, the domestic church is the most important part of the kingdom of God. So the domestic church would be the husband, wife, and his children. And he said the most important thing he learned is this: forgive and ask for forgiveness. So when your spouse asks for forgiveness, you have to be willing to forgive them. When you did something wrong, you have to be willing to ask for forgiveness. And another great scholar I interviewed, Dr. Robert P. George, said that he goes into every debate or dialogue or discussion with the knowledge that I could be wrong. And that's hard sometimes for us men to realize that, but yeah, we could be wrong. So humility, again, is something we need. And again, we can only get it by the grace of God. And Dr. Peter Criff, speaking of another scholar that I would love to have on Blue Collar and a Scholar, I still haven't figured out how to contact them. If anybody knows, please put in the comments. He makes it clear. He says, a sinner is someone who thinks he's a saint. A saint is someone who knows he's a sinner. So if you marry the person you can't live without, forget about trying to figure out, all the logistics. Just marry her. Marry for love. Don't marry for money. Don't marry for, this will be a good part. You're not coming into a business agreement. You're marrying because you love her. If you're always willing to forgive and ask for forgiveness, and you know that you can't do any of this, none of this can be done without the grace of God. This is what I learned. To be married 40 years, you have to trust in the grace of God. You have to admit you're a sinner. You have to admit you can't do it. And you have to trust that he can do it. It only takes, we heard, I believe it was this past Sunday, the gospel, a mustard seed of faith, and you can say to this tree, go into the ocean, and you can uproot it and put it into the ocean. Just ask Jesus for a mustard seed of faith, no matter where your marriage is, to save your marriage. And if you're not married, if you've been married and you're not married anymore, just ask the Lord wherever you're at, where does he want you to be? And he'll tell you. Pray, and nothing is impossible. Like in the world's eyes, like, oh, you can never do that. You can never remarry. God wants to bring you to heaven. And in marriage, it's a sacrament because we help each other get there. But sometimes God calls us to be single. So don't force marriage if God's calling you to be like St. Paul. But if you really feel he's calling you to marriage, and you're thinking you're tangled up in knots, there's no way, I got all these past sins. God can do anything. God gave us a church to accompany us. And the church's desire is to bring everyone to heaven. Have everyone at the communion table together as a family. So trust the church that Jesus gave us to help you, to accompany you and guide you to heaven. To guide you if you feel called to be married, whatever your circumstances. And life, life is crazy. We all have these plans, and then life happens, It's a good saying because it's real. So God bless, and stay Catholic.